I found the photo on a Tuesday afternoon. That's the kind of detail you remember when your whole life explodes in a single moment. Tuesday, 3:15 in the afternoon. The sun was coming through the office window at that particular angle that only happens in late autumn, turning everything golden and warm and false. I wasn't snooping. I need you to understand that. I wasn't the kind of wife who goes through her husband's things, looking for evidence of affairs, or secret bank accounts, or whatever other terrible things wives are supposed to suspect their husbands of hiding. David and I had been married for 12 years. Good years. Happy years. The kind of marriage where you finish each other's sentences and know how the other person takes their coffee and can communicate entire conversations with just a look across a crowded room. Or at least, I thought we had that kind of marriage. I was looking for a stapler. That's it. That's the mundane, stupid, ordinary reason that my entire world fell apart. I needed to staple some documents for Sophie's school registration, and I knew David kept a good stapler in his home office desk because he was particular about office supplies in a way that I used to tease him about. Only you would have strong opinions about staplers, I'd say, and he'd laugh and kiss my forehead and say something about the importance of quality tools. The stapler was in the top right drawer, exactly where I expected it to be, nestled among paper clips and sticky notes and those little binder clips that David insisted on organizing by size. I smiled when I saw them, all lined up in perfect rows. That was so David. Everything in its place, everything organized, everything controlled. I almost closed the drawer. I had the stapler in my hand. I was already turning away. But then I saw it. Just a corner of photo paper sticking out from under a manila folder at the back of the drawer. Something about it caught my eye. Maybe it was the way it was hidden, tucked away like it was meant to stay hidden. Maybe it was just instinct, that animal sense we have when something is wrong, even before our conscious mind catches up. I pulled out the photo. It was my daughter, Sophie, my beautiful, perfect 7-year-old Sophie, with her wild, dark curls and her gap-toothed smile and those eyes that could light up a room. She was maybe 2 years old in the photo, sitting in a high chair with birthday cake smeared all over her face, laughing at whoever was behind the camera. It was clearly a birthday party. There were balloons in the background, streamers, other children at a table. But I had never seen this photo before. I had never seen that high chair before. I had never seen those balloons or that room or any of it. And I had every single photo of Sophie's second birthday. Every single one. I had them in albums and on my phone and backed up on 3 different cloud services because I was terrified of losing any memories of my daughter's childhood. This photo didn't exist in my collection, but it existed in David's desk drawer, hidden under a folder. My hands started shaking. I put the stapler down on the desk without even realizing I was doing it. I stared at the photo, trying to make sense of it, trying to find some reasonable explanation for why my husband would have a photo of my daughter that I'd never seen before, from a birthday party I'd never attended. I turned the photo over. There was writing on the back, feminine handwriting, looping and careful. Lily's second birthday. She loved the cake. Thank you for everything. M. Lily. Not Sophie. Lily. I sat down in David's office chair because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. I read the words again, and again, and again. Like if I read them enough times, they would start to make sense. Like they would rearrange themselves into something that didn't feel like the floor dropping out from under me. Lily. Sophie's name was Sophie. We had named her Sophie when we adopted her 5 years ago, when she was 2 years old. We had chosen the name together, David and I, sitting at our kitchen table with a baby name book between us and this tiny, solemn little girl playing quietly in the next room. She had been Sophie Claire Martinez for 5 years. That was her name. That was who she was. Except apparently, before she was Sophie, she was Lily. And someone named M had thrown her a second birthday party that I knew nothing about. I should have put the photo back. I should have closed the drawer and walked away and asked David about it calmly, rationally, when he got home from work. That's what a mature, trusting wife would have done. That's what the version of me from 3 minutes ago would have done. But I didn't feel like that version of myself anymore. That version of myself existed in a world where I knew everything about my daughter, where I trusted my husband completely, where our family made sense. This version of myself, the one sitting in David's chair, holding this impossible photo, reading this impossible name, this version didn't trust anything anymore. I opened the other drawers. The second drawer was just boring office supplies. Pens, highlighters, printer paper, a box of business cards. Normal things. The kind of things you'd expect to find in a home office desk. I almost felt relieved. Maybe the photo was just some weird mistake. Maybe there was a simple explanation. The third drawer was locked. I stared at that locked drawer for a long time. David had never mentioned that any of his desk drawers locked. I'd been in his office hundreds of times, put things away, borrowed supplies, and I'd never noticed that one of the drawers had a lock. Why would I? Why would I pay attention to something like that when I trusted my husband? When I thought I knew everything there was to know about our life together? I looked around the office, trying to think where David might keep a key. The logical place would be in one of the other drawers, but I just looked through those. I checked anyway, digging through the paper clips and sticky notes more frantically now, making a mess of David's careful organization. Nothing. I went to his bookshelf and started pulling books out, shaking them, checking for hidden compartments like I was in some kind of spy movie. This wasn't me. I didn't do things like this. I was Claire Martinez, high school English teacher, devoted mother, faithful wife. I read books and made dinner and helped with homework and trusted my husband. Except my husband had a locked drawer. Except my daughter used to be named Lily. Except someone named M was thanking David for everything on the back of a photo I'd never seen. I found the key taped to the bottom of David's desk drawer, the one that had held the photo. Of course, hidden in plain sight. I almost laughed, except nothing about this was funny. Nothing about this made sense. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the key in the lock. It took me 3 tries. When the drawer finally opened, I had to take a deep breath before I could look inside. Bank statements. That's what was in the locked drawer. Printouts of bank statements from an account I'd never seen before. An account in David's name only. An account that had been active for 5 years. I pulled out the first statement from just last month. There were regular deposits, David's paycheck, which made sense, and regular withdrawals. Groceries, gas, the mortgage payment, normal stuff, and 1 transfer. Every month for 5 years, according to the statements I was now pulling out of the drawer with shaking hands. 1 transfer on the 15th of every month for exactly $2,000 to an account belonging to someone named Melissa Torres. $2,000 every month For 5 years. I did the math in my head even though I didn't want to. Even though I knew the answer would make everything worse. $120,000. David had sent $120,000 to Melissa Torres over the past 5 years, and I had never known about it. M. The handwriting on the back of the photo. M for Melissa. I sat on the floor of David's office, surrounded by bank statements, holding that photo of my daughter, my Sophie, her Lily, and I tried to breathe through the panic that was closing my throat. I tried to think. I tried to understand. When we adopted Sophie, we were told her mother had died. Cancer. Stage 4. She'd lasted longer than the doctors expected, they said. Long enough to make arrangements for her daughter. Long enough to find a good family who would love Lily, Sophie, the way she deserved to be loved. She'd picked us specifically, they told us. She'd seen our file and known we were the right family. She'd died peacefully, knowing her daughter would be safe. They'd even shown us a death certificate. I remember it clearly because I'd cried when I saw it. Melissa Torres, age 27, cause of death. Complications from metastatic breast cancer. I'd cried for this young mother I'd never met, who'd had to say goodbye to her baby. I'd promised her silently that I would love her daughter like my own, that I would tell Sophie about her someday, when she was old enough to understand, that I would make sure she knew she'd been loved by 2 mothers. Except Melissa Torres wasn't dead. Melissa Torres was alive and receiving $2,000 a month from my husband. And I didn't understand anything anymore. I couldn't confront David. Not yet. I needed to understand what was happening first. I needed to know the truth before I accused my husband of what? What was I even accusing him of? Lying about Sophie's adoption? Secretly sending money to a woman who was supposed to be dead? Having some kind of relationship with my daughter's birth mother? I couldn't think straight. Every time I tried to line up the facts in my head, they scattered like marbles, rolling in different directions, refusing to form a coherent picture. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. The bank statements back in the locked drawer. The photo back under the manila folder. The key back under the desk drawer. I even straightened David's paper clips and binder clips, returning them to their perfect rows. I was shaking the whole time, and it took me 20 minutes to do what should have taken 2, but I was meticulous. David couldn't know I'd been in his desk. Not yet. I picked up Sophie from school at 3:30, just like I did every day. She bounced out of the building with her best friend Emma, the 2 of them giggling about something that had happened at recess. She threw her arms around my waist when she reached me, and I held her tighter than usual, breathing in the smell of her hair. Strawberry shampoo and playground dust and something uniquely Sophie. "Mom, you're squishing me," she said, but she was laughing, so I squished her a little more before letting go. "Sorry, baby. I just missed you today." "You always miss me," she said, rolling her eyes in that way 7-year-olds do when their parents are being embarrassing. I was only at school for 6 hours. 6 whole hours, I said, trying to keep my voice light and normal even though my heart was breaking. "That's like an eternity." She chattered the whole way home, telling me about her day, about the math test she thought she'd aced, about how Jaden had gotten in trouble for putting glue in Mia's hair, about how Mrs. Peterson had read them the best chapter of their book. I listened and responded in all the right places, but part of me was somewhere else. Part of me was stuck in that moment in David's office, staring at that photo, reading that name. Lily. Had she known? When we adopted her, when we changed her name, had she remembered being Lily? She'd been 2. That's old enough to know your own name. Old enough to remember. Had she been confused when we started calling her Sophie? Had she asked about her mother? About Melissa? I couldn't remember. God help me, I couldn't remember. Those first few months after the adoption were such a blur of adjustment and bonding, and learning how to be a mother to this quiet, serious little girl who didn't smile much at first. She'd been through so much, they'd told us. Losing her mother, being in foster care. She needed time. She needed patience. She needed love. And I had loved her. From the first moment I saw her photo in the adoption agency file, I had loved her. When they placed her in my arms for the first time, I'd looked down at this tiny person and felt my entire world shift on its axis. This was my daughter. Mine. I would protect her and care for her and make sure she never felt alone or unloved again. But had I stolen her? Had David and I taken her from a mother who wasn't actually dead? From a mother who was very much alive and had been watching her daughter grow up from a distance, receiving photos and updates and $2,000 a month like some kind of payment? The thought made me feel sick. We got home, and Sophie ran upstairs to start her homework like the responsible kid she was. I stood in the kitchen and stared at my phone, at the search bar on the screen, trying to decide what to do next. I could search for Melissa Torres. I could try to find her on social media, track her down, figure out who she was and what her connection to David was. I could hire a private investigator. I could confront David as soon as he walked through the door. Or I could do nothing. I could pretend I'd never found that photo. I could go back to being the Claire who trusted her husband and thought she knew everything about her daughter's history. But I couldn't. I couldn't unknow what I'd learned. I couldn't unsee that photo, or those bank statements, or that name written in looping handwriting on the back of a birthday picture. Lily. I opened Facebook and typed Melissa Torres into the search bar. There were hundreds of results. Melissa Torres in Miami, Melissa Torres in New York, Melissa Torres in Los Angeles, Melissa Torres who looked nothing like Sophie, Melissa Torres who looked too old, Melissa Torres who looked too young, and then, on the third page of results, I found her. Melissa Torres. Lives in Portland, Oregon. The profile picture was set to private, but the cover photo was visible, a sunset over a river, peaceful and pretty and completely unremarkable. Portland. We lived in Portland. She'd been here in the same city the whole time. I clicked on the profile. Most of it was private, but I could see a few public posts. Pictures of artwork. She was some kind of artist, maybe? Photos of a small storefront with the caption, 1-year anniversary of Torres Gallery, dated last year. A post from 3 months ago about an art show at a local community center. I stared at that storefront photo for a long time. Torres Gallery. Was that where David sent the money every month? Was he supporting her business? Supporting her? Why? I clicked through to the gallery's website. It was small and professional, showcasing paintings and pottery and handmade jewelry. There was a photo of Melissa on the About page, and my heart stopped. She looked like Sophie. Not exactly, but enough. The same dark curls, though Melissa's were longer. The same shaped eyes. The same smile, though Melissa's didn't have a gap in it. This was Sophie's mother. This was the woman who was supposed to be dead. The gallery's address was listed at the bottom of the page. It wasn't far, maybe 20 minutes from our house. I could drive there right now. I could walk into that gallery and demand answers. I could ask her why she gave up her daughter, why she let us think she was dead, why she'd been taking money from my husband for 5 years. But I didn't. Not that day. Because Sophie came downstairs asking for help with her math homework, and I had to be mom. I had to sit at the kitchen table and explain how to add fractions and praise her for showing her work and pretend like my entire world wasn't crumbling around me. David came home at 6:30, just like he always did. He kissed me on the cheek, asked how my day was, ruffled Sophie's hair when she ran over to hug him. We had dinner. We talked about our days. Sophie told David about Jaden and the glue, and he laughed and asked if Mrs. Peterson had handled it well. I pushed food around my plate and tried to act normal and wondered how he could sit there, so calm and casual, when he'd been lying to me for 5 years. After dinner, after Sophie was in bed, after David had settled in to watch the news, I excused myself and went upstairs to our bedroom. I locked the door and sat on the edge of our bed and allowed myself to fall apart. I cried. Silently, desperately, into a pillow so no one would hear. I cried for the family I thought I had, for the marriage I thought was honest, for the daughter whose history was all lies. I cried until I couldn't anymore, until I was empty and exhausted and numb. Then I wiped my face, fixed my hair, and went back downstairs to sit next to my husband on the couch, like nothing was wrong. Because I still didn't know what to do. I still didn't know how to ask the questions that needed to be asked. I still didn't know if I wanted to know the answers. I went to the gallery 2 days later. I'd spent 48 hours trying to talk myself out of it, trying to convince myself to confront David first, to demand the truth from him before I went sneaking around behind his back. That's what wives did in movies, right? They confronted their husbands. They had dramatic arguments where everything came out and tears were shed and truths were revealed. But I couldn't. Every time I looked at David, every time I tried to form the words, they stuck in my throat. How do you ask your husband if he's been lying to you for 5 years? How do you ask if your daughter's dead mother is actually alive? How do you even begin a conversation like that? So I went to the gallery instead. It was a Thursday afternoon. I'd taken a personal day from school, telling them I had a doctor's appointment. Sophie was at school. David was at work. I had the whole day to myself, and I spent the morning pacing around my house, trying to build up the courage to drive to that address I'd memorized from the website. Torres Gallery was in a cute neighborhood I'd been to before, lined with little shops and cafes and bookstores. The kind of area where young professionals and artists lived, where rent was expensive, but the coffee was good. I'd probably walked past this gallery a dozen times without ever noticing it. It was small. That was my first thought when I finally parked across the street and stared at it through my car window. Just a tiny storefront squeezed between a vintage clothing shop and a bakery. The windows were full of paintings, bright, abstract things that looked expensive. A sign hung above the door. Torres Gallery in simple black letters. I sat in my car for 15 minutes, trying to decide if I was really going to do this. Trying to figure out what I would even say. Hi, I'm the woman who adopted your daughter after we were told you died, but apparently that was a lie. So I thought I'd stop by and ask you what the hell is going on? Yeah, that would go over well. But I couldn't sit in my car forever, and I'd come this far, and I needed answers, even if getting them meant walking into that gallery and confronting a complete stranger who somehow wasn't a stranger at all. I got out of the car before I could change my mind. The gallery had a little bell that chimed when I opened the door. It was warm inside and bright and smelled like paint and coffee. The walls were covered with artwork, paintings mostly, but also some photographs and a few small sculptures. Soft music was playing from somewhere. Everything was tasteful and carefully arranged, the kind of place where you felt like you should whisper. "I'll be right with you," a voice called from the back. I knew that voice would be hers before she appeared. I don't know how. I just knew. Melissa Torres came out from a back room, wiping her hands on a cloth. She was wearing jeans and a paint-splattered t-shirt, and her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was smiling, the kind of friendly, professional smile you give customers when they walk into your shop. The smile froze when she saw me. Not immediately. For maybe 2 seconds, she was still smiling, still walking toward me with that welcoming gallery owner energy. But then something in her face changed. Her eyes went wide. Her smile collapsed. All the color drained from her face, and she stopped walking so abruptly that she actually stumbled a little. "Oh my God," she whispered. We stood there, staring at each other across this tiny art gallery, and I watched her piece it together. Watched her see my face and recognize something in it. David, probably. She'd know what my husband looked like. She'd probably seen photos. Or maybe she'd even met him. Maybe he came here every month when he made those transfers. Maybe they had coffee together and talked about the daughter they shared. The daughter she'd given up. The daughter she was still watching from a distance. "You're Claire," she said. Not a question. A statement. She knew who I was. "You're Melissa," I said back. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Too calm, too steady, like I was commenting on the weather instead of confronting the woman who was supposed to be dead. She nodded. She was still pale, still frozen in place, still looking at me like I was a ghost, like I was the one who wasn't supposed to exist. "I think," I said, and my voice was shaking now, all that false calm falling away. "I think you need to tell me what the hell is going on." Melissa closed her eyes, took a deep breath. When she opened them again, there were tears spilling down her cheeks. "You weren't supposed to find out," she whispered. "He said you'd never find out. He promised me you'd never know." And somehow, hearing her say it, hearing her confirm that yes, David had lied, yes, this was all real, yes, everything I'd thought about my family was wrong, somehow that was worse than not knowing. Somehow, that made it all crash down on me at once. I sat down hard on a bench against the wall because my legs weren't working anymore. I put my head in my hands and tried to breathe, tried to process, tried to understand. "Start from the beginning," I said, not looking up. "Tell me everything, please. I need to understand what my husband did." I heard her lock the front door, flip the sign to closed. Then she sat down next to me on that bench, close but not touching, and she started to talk. "I was 22 when I got pregnant," Melissa said. Her voice was quiet, almost mechanical, like she was telling a story that had happened to someone else. "Young, stupid, in love with a man who didn't love me back. When I told him about the baby, he left, just gone. Blocked my number, moved out of our apartment, disappeared completely. I never heard from him again." I still had my head in my hands. I couldn't look at her. If I looked at her, this would be too real. So I stared at the floor and listened. I tried to keep her, Melissa continued. I really did. I got a job waitressing, moved in with my mom, did everything I could to make it work. And for 2 years, it was okay. Hard, but okay. Lily was... Her voice broke on the name. She was perfect. She was everything. I loved her so much. Lily, my daughter's name. The name I'd never heard her called before this week. But then my mom got sick. Alzheimer's. She needed full-time care, and I couldn't afford that, and daycare, and rent, and everything else. I was drowning. I was working 2 jobs and barely sleeping, and watching my mom forget who I was. And I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be a good mother to Lily when I was falling apart. She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice, even though I still wasn't looking at her. I decided to give her up for adoption, she said. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but I thought it was the right one. I thought she deserved better than what I could give her. I thought she deserved a stable family, 2 parents, a house without creditors calling every day, and electricity getting shut off because I couldn't pay the bill. I thought she deserved better than me. So, you just gave her away? I said, and I hated how harsh my voice sounded, but I couldn't help it. I couldn't help the anger that was rising up underneath all the confusion and hurt. I didn't just give her away, Melissa said, and now there was steel in her voice. I went through an adoption agency. I was careful. I looked at every single file they showed me. I wanted to find the perfect family for her. Parents who would love her the way she deserved. And then I found your file. She paused. I finally looked up at her. She was staring straight ahead, tears running down her face, but her jaw was set. You and David looked perfect, she said. This beautiful couple who'd been trying to have a baby for years. David was a finance manager. You were a teacher. You owned a house. You had stable jobs and good incomes and glowing references, and everything looked so perfect. Like Lily would want for nothing. Like she'd have the life I couldn't give her. You picked us, I said. My throat felt tight. I picked you, she agreed. The agency said you were desperate for a child. That you'd been through years of fertility treatments that hadn't worked. That you'd love Lily like your own. That you'd give her everything I couldn't. So I signed the papers. I said goodbye to my daughter. I watched them take her away, and I thought I was doing the right thing. But you're not dead, I said. We were told you died. Cancer. Melissa flinched. I know. That wasn't supposed to happen. The adoption was supposed to be closed. I wasn't supposed to have any contact with Lily after the adoption went through. That's what I agreed to. That's what I thought was happening. Then what happened? I demanded. How did we end up with a fake death certificate? How did David end up sending you money every month? How did any of this happen? She took a shaky breath. About 6 months after the adoption, I got a call from David. I don't know how he got my number. The adoption was supposed to be sealed. But he called me. He said he needed to meet with me. That it was important. That it was about Lily. My heart was pounding. What did he want? He told me that you were struggling, Melissa said quietly. That you'd bonded with Lily, with Sophie, but that you were haunted by the idea of her birth mother. That you cried every night thinking about me. That you were terrified I'd change my mind someday and try to take her back. That you couldn't fully embrace being her mother because you were so worried about me being out there somewhere, a threat to your family. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Because it was true. All of it was true. Those first months after we adopted Sophie, I'd been terrified. Every time there was a knock on the door, every time the phone rang, I'd been convinced it was someone coming to tell us there had been a mistake, that Sophie's birth mother wanted her back, that we had to give her up. I'd had nightmares about it. I'd cried to David about it more times than I could count. He said the only way you could really be Sophie's mother was if I was gone, Melissa continued. Not physically gone, just legally gone, officially gone. He said if you thought I was dead, you could stop worrying. You could stop seeing me as a threat. You could just be a mom. So he faked your death, I said. The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. He offered me money, Melissa said. A lot of money. Enough to take care of my mom, to keep us afloat, to give me some breathing room. All I had to do was disappear. Agree to a fake death certificate. Never contact you or Sophie. Let you believe I was gone. And you agreed. I couldn't keep the judgment out of my voice. She turned to look at me then, and her eyes were blazing. I was 23 years old. My mother had Alzheimer's. I'd just given up my daughter. I was barely surviving. And this man, your husband, showed up offering me $2,000 a month for the rest of my life if I would just let you be happy. If I would just let my daughter have a real family without the complication of a birth mother in the background. What would you have done? I didn't have an answer to that. I wanted to say I would have said no. I wanted to say I would have fought for my daughter, would have found another way, would have never agreed to fake my own death. But I'd never been 23 and desperate and alone. I'd never had to choose between my pride and keeping a roof over my head. I'd never had to give up my child. I thought it would be better for everyone, Melissa said, and her voice was small now, defeated. I thought Lily, Sophie, would be better off with a mother who could love her without guilt or fear. I thought you deserved to be her real mom. And I thought maybe it was my penance for not being strong enough to keep her, for giving her away in the first place. We sat in silence for a long moment. I tried to process everything she'd told me, tried to line it up with what I knew, with the years I'd spent as Sophie's mother, with the husband I thought I knew. Does she know? I finally asked. Does Sophie know about you? Melissa shook her head. No, that was part of the agreement. I was never to contact her, never to see her. David sends me photos sometimes, updates. He tells me how she's doing in school, what she's interested in, if she's happy. But I've never seen her in person, not since the day I gave her up. You've been watching her grow up from a distance, I said. Through photos, through David. Yes. And you're okay with that? You're okay with just watching? With not being part of her life? Melissa's face crumpled. No, she whispered. No, I'm not okay with it. I hate it. I think about her every single day. I wonder what she sounds like now, what her laugh sounds like, what makes her happy, what scares her. I wonder if she ever thinks about me, if she has questions about her birth mother, if she trailed off, crying too hard to continue. I sat there next to this woman who'd given birth to my daughter, this woman who'd let David pay her to stay dead, this woman who was supposed to be the villain in this story, but just seemed broken and sad and human. And I didn't know what to feel. I was angry. Of course I was angry. At David for lying to me for 5 years. at Melissa for agreeing to this insane arrangement, at the adoption agency for not catching that something was wrong, at myself for not seeing the signs, for being so naive, for trusting so completely that I'd never even thought to question the story we'd been told. But underneath the anger, there was something else, something I didn't want to acknowledge but couldn't deny. Relief. Because Melissa was right about one thing. I had been terrified of her when we first adopted Sophie. I had spent months worried that she'd come back and take my daughter away, that she'd change her mind about the adoption, that I'd lose the child I'd already come to love more than my own life. And when they told us she was dead, when they showed us that death certificate, I'd been sad for her. I'd cried for her, but I'd also been relieved, because it meant Sophie was really, truly mine, forever. No complications, no threats, no birth mother who might reappear someday. Just us, just our family. David had known that. He'd known exactly how terrified I was, and he'd found a way to eliminate that fear. And in doing so, he'd built our family on a foundation of lies. I need to go, I said abruptly, standing up. I couldn't sit here anymore. I couldn't look at Melissa's tear-stained face and think about how she'd given up her daughter and how I'd raised that daughter and how we were both victims and villains in a story that neither of us had asked to be part of. Claire, wait. Melissa stood too, reaching out like she wanted to grab my arm, but stopping herself. What are you going to do? Are you going to tell Sophie? Are you going to tell people about the fake death certificate? Are you going to... I don't know, I said, and it was true. I didn't know anything anymore. I need to talk to David. I need to understand why he did this. He did it for you? Melissa said quietly. He loves you. He wanted you to be happy, to not be afraid. That's why he did it. He lied to me, I said. My voice was shaking. For 5 years, he lied about something fundamental to our family. How is that love? Melissa didn't have an answer to that. Neither did I. I walked out of the gallery and got in my car and drove home in a daze. I went through the rest of the day on autopilot, picked up Sophie from school, made dinner, helped with homework, read bedtime stories, tucked her in and kissed her forehead and told her I loved her, and wondered if she'd ever forgive me when she learned the truth about where she came from. David came home at his usual time. We ate dinner as a family. We made small talk. We pretended everything was normal. And after Sophie was asleep, after the house was quiet, I finally said the words I'd been rehearsing in my head all evening. We need to talk. David knew. The moment I said those 4 words, I saw it in his face. The way his expression shifted from casual to guarded. The way his body tensed. The way his eyes went to the hallway, checking to make sure Sophie's door was closed, that she couldn't hear whatever was about to happen. Okay, he said carefully. What about? We were in the living room. I was standing by the fireplace, as far from him as I could get while still being in the same room. He was on the couch, sitting on the edge of it like he was ready to bolt at any second. I found the photo, I said. In your desk, of Sophie at her 2nd birthday party. Except she wasn't Sophie then. She was Lily. David went very still. All the color drained from his face. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared at me, and I watched him calculate, watched him try to figure out what I knew, how much I'd discovered, how deep I'd dug. I found the bank statements too, I continued. The ones showing 5 years of monthly transfers to Melissa Torres, the woman who's supposed to be dead. Sophie's birth mother, who you've been paying off to stay out of our lives? Claire, he started, but I held up a hand. I went to see her, I said. Melissa, I went to her gallery. We talked. She told me everything. About how you approached her. About the fake death certificate. About the money. About the photos you send her. All of it. David put his head in his hands. Jesus Christ, he muttered. Claire, I can explain. Then explain, I said. My voice was cold, colder than I'd ever heard it. Explain to me why you've been lying to me for 5 years. Explain why you faked a woman's death. Explain why you've been secretly communicating with our daughter's birth mother. Explain why you built our entire family on a foundation of lies. He looked up at me, and I was shocked to see tears in his eyes. David never cried. In 12 years of marriage, I'd seen him cry maybe 3 times. But now his eyes were red and wet, and his voice was shaking when he spoke. I did it for you, he said. Claire, you have to understand. I did all of it for you. For us. For our family. Don't you dare, I said, and I was shaking now too, but with anger, not sadness. Don't you dare try to make this about protecting me. You lied to me, David. You faked a death certificate. Do you understand how insane that is? How illegal? How fucked up? I know, he said miserably. I know. But Claire, you weren't there. You didn't see yourself in those first months after we adopted Sophie. You were a wreck. You couldn't sleep. You cried all the time. You were so terrified that Melissa would come back and take Sophie away that you could barely function. Do you remember that? Do you remember how scared you were? I did remember. Of course I remembered. I'd spent those first months in a constant state of low-level panic, convinced that every day would be the day someone knocked on our door and told us we had to give Sophie back, that the adoption would fall through, that Melissa would change her mind, that our family would be torn apart before it even really began. I was adjusting, I said, but my voice was weaker now. All new parents go through that. All adoptive parents worry. That's normal. It wasn't normal, Claire, David said. It was more than that. You were having panic attacks. You were checking Sophie's room multiple times a night to make sure she was still there. You were convinced every time the phone rang that it was the adoption agency calling to take her back. You couldn't enjoy being her mother because you were so terrified of losing her. So you decided to fake her birth mother's death? I demanded. That was your solution? Not therapy, not medication, not just giving me time to adjust, but committing fraud? I didn't plan it, David said desperately. I swear, Claire, I didn't plan any of this. It just happened. I was trying to find information about Melissa. Just basic stuff. Was she stable? Was she likely to try to get Sophie back? Did we need to worry about her? I thought if I could just confirm that she was doing okay and had moved on, I could reassure you. I could tell you that she wasn't going to suddenly reappear. But you didn't just find information about her, I said. You contacted her. I did, he admitted. I tracked down her number. I called her. I just wanted to talk to her, to understand what her intentions were regarding Sophie. And when I met her, he trailed off, shaking his head. Claire, she was a kid, 23 years old, working 2 jobs, taking care of a mother with Alzheimer's, barely making rent. She was struggling so badly, and when I asked her about Sophie, she started crying. She told me giving up her daughter was the hardest thing she'd ever done, but she couldn't keep her. She couldn't give her the life she deserved. And you felt sorry for her, I said flatly. I did, David said. I felt terrible for her. But more than that, I saw an opportunity. She was desperate for money. She'd already decided to stay out of Sophie's life. She'd agreed to a closed adoption. She wasn't going to try to get her back. So I thought, if I could help her financially, if I could make her life a little easier, and in exchange, she agreed to make things easier for you. By faking her death. It wasn't just about that, David said quickly. The money was for her too, to help her with her mom's care, to give her a chance to get on her feet, to build a life for herself. It was a way to help everyone. Everyone except me, I said bitterly. Because you didn't tell me. You didn't give me a choice. You just decided, all on your own, to create this elaborate lie and expect me to live in it forever. Because you would have said no, David burst out. If I'd told you what I wanted to do, you would have stopped me. You would have said it was wrong, that we couldn't do it, that we had to tell the truth. And you'd still be having panic attacks. You'd still be terrified. You'd still be unable to just be Sophie's mom without all that fear hanging over you. That wasn't your decision to make, I said, and my voice cracked. That was my fear to work through, my problem to solve. You had no right to take that away from me. No right to decide what I could and couldn't handle. I know, David said, and now he was crying openly. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Claire. I thought I was helping. I thought I was fixing things. I thought if you just believed Melissa was dead, you could relax and be the mother Sophie needed. And it worked, didn't it? You stopped having panic attacks. You stopped checking Sophie's room at night. You stopped being so afraid. You became the confident, loving mother I always knew you could be. Because I was living in a lie, I said. Everything I've been for the past 5 years, all that confidence, all that security, it was based on something that wasn't real. Don't you see how that invalidates everything? Every moment I spent feeling secure in our family, every time I thought to myself, Sophie is really ours, forever. Every time I was grateful that her birth mother had found peace, all of that was fake, built on lies you told me. The love wasn't fake, David said desperately. Your love for Sophie, her love for you, our family, none of that was fake. That's all real. The only thing that was fake was Melissa's death, and even that, he hesitated. Even that, in a way, was true. The Melissa who gave birth to Sophie, the young mother who couldn't keep her daughter, that person is dead. The woman who exists now, the one running the gallery, she's someone different. She's moved on. She's built a new life. She's not a threat to us. She's not dead, David, I said. You can't philosophically reason your way out of the fact that you faked a death certificate. That's fraud. That's illegal. And what happens when Sophie finds out? Because she will find out. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but someday. Someday she's going to be old enough to ask questions, to look up her own adoption records, to search for her birth mother. And what happens when she discovers that her birth mother is alive? That we lied to her? That her entire history is built on a lie? David's face crumpled. I don't know, he whispered. I don't know. I wanted to protect you. I wanted to protect our family. I wanted Sophie to grow up happy and secure and loved without any complications or confusion about who her real parents are. I wanted us to be a normal family. We're not a normal family, though, I said. We never were. Sophie is adopted. She has a birth mother out there somewhere. That's just part of who she is, part of our story as a family. And instead of accepting that and working through it together, you tried to erase it. You tried to pretend it didn't exist. I'm sorry, David said again. He was still crying, his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I know I should have told you. I know I should have trusted you to handle it. He looked up at me, and his eyes were desperate. I just wanted you to be happy. I wanted us to be happy. Is that so wrong? The method was wrong, I said. The lying was wrong. The deception was wrong. Even if the intention was good, and I'm not sure it was, David. I'm not sure this wasn't at least partly about your need to control everything, to fix everything, to make everything perfect. Even if your intention was good, what you did was wrong. We stared at each other across the living room. This man I'd been married to for 12 years. This man I'd trusted completely. This man who'd lied to me for 5 years about something fundamental to our family. What happens now? David asked quietly. Are you going to leave me? Are you going to tell Sophie? Are you going to report the fake death certificate? What are you going to do? I didn't have answers to those questions. I'd been so focused on finding the truth, on confronting David, on understanding what had happened, that I hadn't thought beyond this moment. I hadn't planned for what came next. I don't know, I admitted. I need time to think. I need to figure out what this means for us, for Sophie, for our family. I need to decide if I can forgive this, if I can trust you again, if we can move forward from this, or if the damage is too great. I love you, David said. I love you and Sophie more than anything in the world. Everything I did for us, for our family. I know I went about it the wrong way, but please, Claire, please don't let this destroy us. Please give me a chance to make this right. I don't know if you can make this right, I said. I don't know if there's any way to undo 5 years of lies, but I'll think about it. That's all I can promise right now. I turned to walk out of the room, headed for the guest bedroom where I planned to spend the night, because I couldn't imagine sleeping next to David right now. Couldn't imagine lying in our bed and pretending everything was okay. Claire, David called after me. For what it's worth, Melissa really did want what was best for Sophie. She gave her up because she loved her, and she stayed away because she loves her. She's not a villain in this. Neither are you. We all just wanted what was best for a little girl who deserved better than the circumstances she was born into. I stopped in the doorway, but didn't turn around. That little girl deserved the truth, I said. She deserved to know where she came from, who her birth mother was, what her real story is. And we took that from her. You and me and Melissa. We all decided that lies were better than truth, that ignorance was better than knowledge, that we knew what was best for her better than she could know for herself. And maybe we did it out of love. Maybe we did it with good intentions. But we still did it. And someday, she's going to have to live with the consequences of the choices we made for her. I left him sitting there in the living room and went to the guest bedroom and locked the door. And then I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the guest bedroom, watching the shadows on the ceiling shift as cars passed outside, and I thought about my daughter sleeping down the hall. My Sophie, Melissa's Lily, a 7-year-old girl who had no idea that her entire history was a carefully constructed lie. What was I supposed to do with this information? How was I supposed to move forward? I thought about the options. I could tell Sophie the truth. sit her down, and explain that her birth mother wasn't dead, that we'd been told something false, that there was a whole other person out there who loved her and thought about her every day. But she was 7 years old. How do you explain something like that to a 7-year-old? How do you tell a child that their parents lied to them about something so fundamental? And what would it do to her? Would it make her feel betrayed? Confused? Would it damage the sense of security and stability we'd worked so hard to build? I could report the fake death certificate. It was fraud, after all. David and Melissa had broken the law. There should be consequences for that, shouldn't there? But if I reported it, what would happen? Would David go to jail? Would Melissa? Would Sophie end up in the middle of some legal nightmare, her adoption called into question, her entire life thrown into chaos? And what would that accomplish, really, except destroying our family in a very public, very permanent way? I could leave David. God knows I had grounds for it. He'd lied to me for 5 years. He'd committed fraud. He'd made a unilateral decision that affected our entire family and never gave me a choice in the matter. Those were legitimate reasons to end a marriage. But did I want that? Did I want to tear apart Sophie's family? To put her through a divorce? To upend her entire world because her father had made a terrible choice with good intentions? Or I could do nothing. I could keep the secret, just like David and Melissa had been doing. I could pretend I didn't know. I could go back to being the confident, secure mother I'd been before I found that photo. I could let Sophie grow up believing her birth mother was dead. Could let her have the simple, uncomplicated family story we'd been telling her. But could I do that? Could I look at my daughter every day and know I was lying to her? Could I sleep next to David every night knowing what he'd done? Could I live with myself? I didn't have answers. I didn't know what the right choice was, or if there even was a right choice. Every option seemed wrong in some way, seemed like it would hurt someone, seemed like it would have consequences I couldn't predict or control. So I lay there in the dark and tried to figure out what mattered most, what I was trying to protect, what I was trying to preserve. And the answer, when it came, was simple: Sophie. Everything else, my marriage, my pride, my sense of betrayal, my anger at David, my complicated feelings about Melissa, all of that was secondary. What mattered most was my daughter, her happiness, her stability, her sense of security in the world. So the question wasn't what I wanted to do, or what would make me feel better, or what would punish the people who'd lied to me. The question was, what would be best for Sophie? And I realized I didn't know. I couldn't answer that question alone, because I was too close to it, too emotional, too angry and hurt and confused to see clearly. I needed help. I called my sister the next morning. Jenna lived 3 hours away with her husband and 2 kids, and we talked maybe once a week, usually about nothing important. But she was the person I trusted most in the world after David, and right now, I couldn't trust David, so she was it. "Can you come visit?" I asked when she answered the phone. "I need to talk to you about something, in person. It's important." She heard something in my voice. Jenna had always been good at that, at reading between the lines, at knowing when something was really wrong. "Is it Sophie? Is she okay?" "She's fine," I said. "Physically, I mean. But Jenna, I need your help. I need someone I can talk to who isn't involved in this, who can help me figure out what to do." "I can come this weekend." she said. Is that soon enough, or do you need me now? Weekend is fine, I said. David and I are still living in the same house. We're keeping things normal for Sophie. But I can't talk to him about this. I can't think clearly when he's around. I need someone else. Okay, Jenna said, and I could hear the worry in her voice. Okay, I'll be there Saturday morning. We'll figure this out, whatever it is. I made it through the next 2 days by compartmentalizing. At school, I was Ms. Martinez, English teacher, focused on lesson plans and grading essays and helping teenagers understand Shakespeare. At home, I was Mom, making dinner and helping with homework and reading bedtime stories. And in the very late hours of the night, after everyone else was asleep, I was Claire, the woman whose world had fallen apart, sitting in the guest bedroom and trying to figure out what to do. David and I barely spoke. We maintained a facade of normalcy in front of Sophie. But when she wasn't around, we avoided each other. He tried to talk to me a few times, tried to apologize or explain or justify, but I held up a hand and told him I wasn't ready yet. I needed time. I needed space. I needed to figure out what I was feeling before I could listen to anything else he had to say. He respected that at least. Or maybe he was just scared. Scared that if he pushed too hard, I'd leave. Scared that if he said the wrong thing, I'd report the fake death certificate or tell Sophie or do something that couldn't be undone. Saturday morning, Jenna showed up at 9 a.m. sharp. She pulled me into a hug the second I opened the door, and I almost broke down right there. Almost let all the emotions I'd been holding back for the past week come flooding out. But Sophie was in the next room, and David was upstairs, and I couldn't fall apart yet. Coffee first, Jenna said, reading my face. Then we talk. We took our coffee to the back patio, where we could see if anyone was coming, but couldn't be overheard. It was a cold morning, and we wrapped ourselves in blankets, sitting across from each other at our outdoor table like we were discussing something normal. The weather, weekend plans, what to make for dinner. Okay, Jenna said. Tell me. So I did. I told her everything. About the photo in David's desk. About the bank statements and the locked drawer. About driving to Melissa's gallery and confronting her. About the fake death certificate and the 5 years of lies and the $2,000 a month. About David's explanation, his justification, his desperate insistence that he'd done it all for me, for us, for our family. Jenna listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and let out a long, slow breath. Holy shit, she said. Yeah, I agreed. Holy shit, Claire. That's insane. That's completely insane. I know. We sat in silence for a minute. Jenna stared into her coffee cup like it might hold answers. I picked at a loose thread on my blanket and tried not to cry. What do you want to do? Jenna finally asked. I don't know, I admitted. That's why I called you? I can't figure out what the right thing to do is. Every option seems wrong. Tell me the options, Jenna said. Let's go through them. So we did. We spent the next hour talking through every possible choice, every potential consequence, every angle I hadn't considered. Jenna asked hard questions. She played devil's advocate. She made me think through scenarios I hadn't wanted to face. If you tell Sophie now, she's 7, Jenna pointed out. She's not going to understand the complexity of this. She's going to hear, your birth mother is alive and your parents lied to you. And that's going to be traumatizing. But if you wait, if you let her find out when she's older, maybe when she's a teenager or an adult and can process it better, you're still lying to her for years, still maintaining this false history. Can you live with that? I don't know, I said miserably. If you report the fake death certificate, you're potentially destroying your family, Jenna continued. David could face legal consequences, Melissa too. The adoption might be called into question. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but that seems like a possibility. And Sophie would definitely find out. It would all come out. Is that what you want? No, I said. I don't want that. But shouldn't there be consequences? Shouldn't David and Melissa face some kind of accountability for what they did? Maybe, Jenna said. But at what cost? And what does accountability look like here? Jail time? Fines? Public humiliation? Would any of that make you feel better? Would it help Sophie? I didn't have an answer. And if you leave David, Jenna said gently, you're punishing Sophie as much as you're punishing him. She loses her family. She goes through a divorce. Her whole world gets turned upside down. Is that fair to her? Nothing about this is fair to her, I said, and now I was crying. That's the whole problem, Jenna. Sophie is the only innocent person in this entire mess. She didn't ask for any of this. She didn't ask to be adopted, or to have her birth mother fake her death, or to have parents who lied to her about where she came from. And now I have to make choices that will affect the rest of her life, and I don't know what the right choice is. Jenna reached across the table and took my hand. Claire, I don't think there is a right choice here. I think there are just choices, and they all have consequences, and you have to decide which consequences you can live with. That's not helpful, I said, but I was almost laughing through my tears. I know, Jenna said, squeezing my hand. I'm sorry, but I think you need to ask yourself what matters most. Not what's fair or what's right in some abstract sense, but what actually matters to you. What do you want your life to look like? What do you want Sophie's life to look like? And then make choices that move you toward that, even if they're not perfect choices. I thought about that. What did I want? I wanted Sophie to be happy. I wanted her to feel secure and loved and certain of her place in our family. I wanted her to grow up confident and stable, without the trauma of discovering that her entire history was a lie. I wanted my marriage to survive, despite everything, despite the lies and the betrayal and the anger. I still loved David. I still believed he was a good man who'd made a terrible choice. I still wanted the family we'd built together, but I also wanted truth. I wanted honesty. I wanted Sophie to know where she came from, even if that knowledge was complicated. I wanted her to have the choice someday to know her birth mother if she wanted to. I said slowly, I think I need to talk to Melissa again. Jenna raised her eyebrows. Okay, why? Because she's part of this too. Because she's Sophie's birth mother, and she loves her, and she's been living with this secret for 5 years just like David has. Because if we're going to figure out what's best for Sophie, we all need to be part of that conversation. Not just me and David deciding what's best. Not just keeping her in the dark and hoping it works out. We need to actually think about what Sophie will need as she grows up, what questions she'll have, what relationship she might want with her birth mother someday. And you think Melissa will agree to that? Jenna asked. I don't know, I admitted. But I have to try, because right now, The only people who have any say in Sophie's story are the adults who've been lying to her. And that's not right. So maybe we can't give her the truth yet. Maybe she's too young for that. But we can at least make sure that when she is ready for the truth, we have a plan. We know what we're going to tell her and how we're going to support her through it. Jenna nodded slowly. That makes sense. That's probably the most mature, thoughtful response to this situation I can imagine. I don't feel mature or thoughtful, I said. I feel angry and hurt and betrayed and terrified. You can be all of those things and still make good choices, Jenna said. That's kind of the definition of being a parent, isn't it? Making good choices for your kid even when you feel like your own life is falling apart? She was right. And I was a parent. That was my job. My first job. Not being a good wife or a good sister or a good person, but being a good mother to Sophie. That had to come first. Okay, I said. Okay, I'm going to call Melissa. I'm going to ask her to meet with me and David, and we're going to figure this out, together. Like adults who actually give a damn about what's best for the child at the center of all this. And what about your marriage? Jenna asked carefully. What about you and David? I took a deep breath. I don't know yet. I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. I still don't know if I can trust him again. But I think I want to try. For Sophie. For the family we've built. For the 12 years we've had together that were good and real and honest, even if the last 5 haven't been. I think I want to try to forgive him and move forward. But it's going to take time. And it's going to take work. And he's going to have to prove to me that he understands how badly he messed up and that he'll never do anything like this again. That seems fair, Jenna said. We finished our coffee and went back inside. David was in the kitchen making pancakes with Sophie, and they both looked up when we entered. Sophie ran over to hug her aunt, chattering about how Dad was making chocolate chip pancakes, her favorite. David met my eyes over her head, and I saw the question there. The fear. The hope. I gave him a small nod. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a willingness to try. To work through this. To figure out how to be a family again, even after everything that had happened. Relief flooded his face. He mouthed, "Thank you." And I looked away because I wasn't ready for gratitude yet. I wasn't ready for anything except putting one foot in front of the other and trying to do what was best for my daughter. 3 days later, we all met at Melissa's gallery. She'd closed it for the afternoon when I called and explained what I wanted. A meeting, the 3 of us, to talk about Sophie, about the lies, about what happened next. She'd been quiet on the phone. I couldn't read her silence. Was it fear? Guilt? Resignation? But she'd agreed. She'd said she'd be there. David and I drove to the gallery together, our first time alone in the car since everything had come out. It was awkward, tense. Neither of us knew what to say. I stared out the window. He focused on the road. We were like strangers who happened to be going to the same place. Melissa was waiting when we arrived. She looked nervous, her hands twisting together, her eyes darting between me and David like she wasn't sure who to focus on. "Thank you for agreeing to this," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Not friendly, but not hostile either. We were all in this together now, whether we liked it or not. "Of course," Melissa said quietly. She's the most important thing. Whatever we need to do for her." We sat down in her small office at the back of the gallery. It was cramped with the 3 of us, and it smelled like paint and coffee. Melissa offered us drinks, but we both declined. This wasn't a social visit. I've been thinking a lot about what happens next, I said, diving in before I could lose my nerve. About what we tell Sophie, and when, and how. About what role you play in her life going forward, Melissa. About how we make this right, if we even can. Okay, Melissa said carefully. And I continued, I think we need to be honest with her. Eventually. Not now, she's too young, but someday, when she's old enough to understand, old enough to process it without being traumatized. We need to tell her the truth about where she came from, about you, about the adoption, about all of it. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? I said. Because she deserves to know. She deserves to understand her own history, even if it's complicated, even if it means learning that we lied to her. That's part of who she is, and we can't just erase it because it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. When? David asked. He looked pale, but resigned, like he'd known this was coming. I don't know exactly, I admitted. Maybe when she's a teenager, old enough to understand the complexity, to ask questions, to make her own choices about what she wants her relationship with Melissa to be. We'll need to talk to a therapist about it, get professional guidance on how to approach it. But someday, yes, we tell her. And until then? Melissa asked. Until then, we figure out a way for you to be part of her life, I said. Not as her mother, I'm her mother, but as, I don't know, a family friend? Someone who cares about her? We can't have you completely absent from her life if you're going to suddenly reappear when she's a teenager. That would be too jarring. But we can let you be present in some capacity. Let you watch her grow up, not just through photos, but in person. Melissa was crying now. You'd really let me do that? It's not about what I want, I said, even though that wasn't entirely true. It's about what's best for Sophie, and I think it's best for her to have a connection to you, even if she doesn't understand what that connection is yet. So yes, we'll find a way to make it work. David was staring at me like he didn't know who I was. Maybe he didn't. Maybe I didn't know who I was anymore either. But I was trying. I was trying to be the person Sophie needed me to be, even if I didn't feel strong enough for it. There are conditions, I said, looking at both of them. First, no more secrets. No more lies. If something changes, if there's new information, if there's anything Sophie needs to know eventually, we tell each other. All of us. We're in this together now, whether we like it or not, and that means being honest with each other. They both nodded. Second, the money stops, I said, looking at David. The monthly transfers. I don't know if that was about supporting Melissa, or buying her silence, or assuaging your guilt or what, but it stops. If Melissa needs help, we can discuss it. As a family, as people who are co-parenting this child, even if that's not the official arrangement, but no more secret payments. Okay, David said quietly. And third, I said, turning back to Melissa, you need to understand that I'm Sophie's mother. Me, not you. You gave birth to her, and you love her, and that's real. But I'm the one who's been raising her for 5 years. I'm the one she calls Mom. I'm the one who knows her favorite bedtime story, and how she likes her sandwiches cut, and what makes her laugh. And that doesn't change just because we're being honest about the past. You need to respect that boundary. I do, Melissa said quickly. I do respect that. Claire, I never wanted to take her from you. I gave her up because I thought you could give her a better life than I could. And you have. She's happy. She's loved. She's thriving. I see that in the photos David sends. I don't want to mess that up. I just want to be part of it, in whatever way you'll let me. I nodded. Then we'll figure it out. Together. The three of us. For Sophie. We talked for another hour, working out the details. How often Melissa could see Sophie. What we'd tell her about who Melissa was. How we'd gradually increase contact over the years so that when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't feel like such a shock. It was uncomfortable and awkward and sometimes tense, but we got through it because we had to, for Sophie. When we finally left the gallery, David and I walked to the car in silence. I still didn't know if our marriage would survive this. I still didn't know if I could fully forgive him, but I knew we were going to try. For Sophie, for the family we'd built, for the hope that maybe, somehow, we could turn these lies into something better, something honest, something real. That was 6 months ago. 6 months of therapy, individual for me, couples for David and me, family therapy with a specialist in adoption issues, 6 months of rebuilding trust, of learning to communicate honestly, of working through the anger and hurt and betrayal. 6 months of carefully, slowly introducing Melissa into Sophie's life as Miss Melissa, a family friend who ran an art gallery and loved spending time with her. Sophie adored her immediately. Of course she did. They had the same laugh, the same gestures, the same creative spirit. Sometimes I watched them together and my heart ached, with joy that my daughter had this connection, with grief that Melissa missed so much of her early years, with fear about what would happen when Sophie learned the truth. But mostly, I felt hope, because we were doing this the right way now, honestly, openly, together. David and I were healing, slowly. Some days were harder than others. Some days I still felt the sting of his betrayal, still questioned whether I could trust him. But more often, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. The man who'd made a terrible mistake trying to protect his family. The man who was working every day to prove he deserved a second chance. And Sophie? Sophie was happy. She was thriving. She had 2 parents who loved her desperately, and a new friend who thought she was amazing, and a life that was stable and secure and full of love. She didn't know the complicated truth yet. She didn't know about the lies and the fake death certificate and the secret payments. But someday she would. And when that day came, we'd be ready. All of us. Together. Because that's what family does. Real family, honest family. We face the hard truths together. We work through the complications together. We love each other through the messy, imperfect reality of being human. I found a photo tucked in my dresser drawer last week. Not the one from David's desk. That one was long gone, destroyed in a moment of anger I don't entirely regret. But a new one, recent, of Sophie and Melissa at the gallery, painting side by side, both of them smiling. David must have taken it on one of their visits. I looked at that photo for a long time. At my daughter and her birth mother, connected by more than blood now. Connected by art and laughter and the careful, patient rebuilding of something that had been broken. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I put the photo in a frame. I placed it on the bookshelf in our living room, right next to the pictures of Sophie's school photos and our family vacations and all the other moments that make up our life. because this is part of our story too. The complicated, messy, imperfect truth of who we are and how we became a family. And someday, when Sophie is ready, we'll tell her. We'll show her this photo and explain what it means. We'll answer her questions and hold her while she processes it all and assure her that every single person in this story, David, me, Melissa, loves her more than anything. But until then, we live, we build, we heal, we create new memories and new traditions and new ways of being a family. We make mistakes and fix them. We hurt each other and forgive. We lie and then learn to tell the truth. We're not perfect. God knows we're not perfect. But we're honest now. And we're trying. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what family really is. Not perfection. Not some fairy tale where everything works out neatly and no one ever makes mistakes. But people who love each other enough to be honest. People who care enough to do the hard work. People who choose, every single day, to show up and try to do better. That's what we are. That's what we're becoming. And I hope, that someday, when Sophie knows the truth, she'll understand. She'll see that we were flawed and human and made terrible choices sometimes. But she'll also see that we loved her, that we tried, that we did our best to give her a family that was real and honest and worth fighting for. That's what I tell myself on the hard days. That's what keeps me going when I doubt everything. Because at the end of the day, underneath all the lies and complications and messy truths, there's just this: a little girl named Sophie who is deeply, completely, unconditionally loved. By me, by David, by Melissa, by everyone in her complicated, imperfect, beautiful family. And maybe that's all that really matters. Maybe that's enough.